It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. Ellie Perez, better known as Ellie the Quilter, started social media channels to teach creative-minded people how to quilt and ended up building a supportive crafting community. The mission of Mojave Farms Quilting Company is to provide an inclusive community for all makers and to make quilting and crafting more accessible to everyone, no matter how well they sew or what their budget is. Ellie strongly believes that everyone is creative and that sewing, quilting, and crafting of any kind should be accessible to everyone. Ellie, I'm so happy to have you on A Quilter's Life.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I was thrilled that Carolina shared your name. I should tell you that I misheard her when I heard her say your name. So I thought she said Telly the Quilter. And I was looking for a couple weeks for Telly, and I could not find her.
That is not me. Definitely not me. I'm glad you found me.
I am too. I had to ask Carolina again. So how did you meet Carolina?
Carolina and I met, she is a sweetheart, through basically social media. You comment on someone's post and you message each other, that sort of thing. And then we were finally able to meet up. She is also in Southern California, like I am. She came up to my area for the Road to California quilt show. So we were able to finally meet in person, got to have dinner and hang out for a little bit. And so we do a lot of texting and messaging and stuff like that, even though we do live not too far from each other, but we still keep in touch that way.
She's one busy lady.
She is very, very busy.
Well, we'll jump back to your life. Where were you born and raised?
I was raised in Southern California in what's called the Inland Empire. I was born in Fontana, California, where there is a well-known Kaiser hospital that everybody knows, Fontana Kaiser. So I was born there, and I was raised in the little cities around there. So like Riverside, Moreno Valley, all of that area. I think I'm the third generation that has been out here. My grandparents came from like Oklahoma and kind of established in the Riverside area. So I was born and raised right around where I'm living now, probably within 40 miles of where I was born and raised is where I live.
Oh, cool. Share a special childhood memory.
I think I have a lot of really great childhood memories. We did a lot of vacationing in my grandparents' RV. We would borrow it and we would do lots of road trips. I think, though, my favorite childhood memory that I share all the time on my own social media is making my very first quilt. So one of my favorite childhood memories, thankfully, gets to be about quilting. And it was my mama who lived not too far from us. And I got to spend lots of summers there and weekends there. And she was a crafter extraordinaire. And we were constantly doing something crafty. One day, I don't know where she got this spark. I'm sure she was ADHD, just thinking back. She was always doing something. And she got this urge to take out all of her old house coats or muumuus or all different kinds of fabric, polyester, cotton, all different kinds. And she got this idea to just start throwing together a quilt. And we had none of the supplies that you have now. We had scissors and she had some cardboard and we drew cardboard squares on all of her muumuus and cut them all up. And we made that into my very first quilt. It was tied. It wasn't really quilted. And I had that until I was well into adulthood and had my own kids. And it started to really, really fall apart and we couldn't keep it any longer. But being that impulsive, creative, that would see something and it would spark something and you'd be like, oh, I got to do this. And you just start tearing into it without a plan. That's how I do a lot of my quilting now is without a plan, without a pattern, and just taking it and flying through it with all of your creative juices flowing. That's definitely one of my favorite all-time childhood memories.
Now, you said she lived close by. Was it walking distance or a short drive?
It probably could have been walking distance, but we drove. It was across a main street. So, yeah, we would kind of drive around the block and then get to her house. And it was really great because, having grandparents nearby, now as a parent, I know that that's awesome because you basically have a built in babysitter that you don't have to pay for. So that's awesome. But definitely getting to spend a lot of time with her and getting to stay the night and wake up and do fun stuff, or they were in a retirement community that had a pool, so we were always at the pools. It was just really, really great to grow up with them nearby.
I'm jealous.
It was a great childhood for sure.
Yeah. Other than quilting, did you have employment?
Yes, I have worked the last 25 years up until about 2 years ago in the mental health and social work field. So I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've worked as a social worker for foster care and adoption agencies, also for like my local county child protective services. I've done a lot of teaching and coaching of social workers. So in Southern California, in order to become a social worker for the county, you have to go through something called the academy. So I was a teacher at the academy. And then once our students were kind of graduating out of there, we would coach them and help them work on their practice so they could be hopefully the best social workers that they could possibly be. So I've done a lot in mental health and social work.
Wow, that is so needed.
Very needed. Lots of people go into it with really, really, really great hearts and wanting to help everybody. So if that's something that people are interested in, I think they definitely need to check that out. It is very fulfilling kind of work. And it's also very stressful or even sometimes traumatizing for you as a social worker because of the work that you have to do. So definitely be aware of that also, that you have to maybe check out your own kind of self-care. That's how I used a lot of my quilting time was as self-care to forget about what I had done that day or that week and just really focus on my creative side and kind of use it as a way to decrease anxiety and stress and just kind of have a zen moment and lean into my quilting and crafting.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned that you lived very close to where you grew up. Did you go away like to college or just away for a while and then come back, or you just were always there?
I have just always been here in this area, maybe within like a 40-50 mile radius. I did go live in the dorms for a year and then very quickly decided that was not for me. People do not sleep, and I love to sleep. And so it was very loud and noisy, and I wanted some calm and I wanted a little bit of space, just a tiny little dorm room. I do still keep in contact with my college roommate, and I feel like we were the only two sane people in that dorm room, and we were very much alike. So somehow we were paired up together and we did really great together. But everyone else, I mean, dorms are big and it gets kind of loud, college kids out having fun. And yeah, I'm just more of like a quiet homebody kind of person. So I did for the other 3 years, I was living at home and then I would commute about 35-45 minutes to campus. So it was a little bit more wear and tear on my car and gas and all that, but it was so much better for me.
I bet that wear and tear on your car was a lot less expensive than the dorm room.
It definitely was. Yeah, dorms are not cheap at all. So, yeah, definitely weighing student loans. And I was going to be in it for the long haul. I was going to be doing my undergrad and then my graduate school and then all my internships to become a therapist. And so, yeah, it was a lot cheaper just to commute than having to live in the dorm all those years.
Is there anything else about your family you wanted to share?
I come from, or I say that I come from, a family of artists and artisans. Not everyone. There are some people in my family that laugh when I say that because they are definitely not crafty minded. But yeah, a lot of people in my family were some sort of artist. So you've heard me talk about my mama was very artsy, craftsy. My mom is very, very artsy craftsy. She and I have a lot of the same hobbies like cake decorating and painting and all that kind of stuff. My dad was a woodworker and he would make these phenomenally intricate kind of things. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And myself, yes, very artsy craftsy. My first job was actually in my aunt's art gallery. She was a professional painter. And so my first job was working in her art gallery, and she was probably most influential with like my drawing and sketching and painting and things like that as I was growing up. Hopefully, that is going to trickle down to my children. They are very creative, not necessarily in the hobbies that I do, but my youngest daughter is a nail technician. So she does nails for women. And she does these designs that are mind blowing that you see on social media and you're like, how do they do that? And those are the kinds of things that she does. So I think it's trickling down through the generations. We do have in her generation some cousins that are also very artsy, craftsy, and they do some knitting and crocheting and things like that. So I think it's great to have an environment like that and grow up in that environment like I did, where there's lots of support and modeling and using your spare time to make something with your hands. And I leaned on that a lot when I was younger and just out of boredom, but also kept doing that into adulthood, which was really great to help when you're stressed or you're bored, or maybe you're going through financial strain and I can't go out with all my friends, but I could do something at home to keep myself busy. So I think it's a great skill, but also something that can help you out with your mental health as well.
Definitely. If you had the chance to talk to your great, great, great grandchildren, what is it you think they will think of you?
Well, now that we've started the business, I would hope that my great or even great great grandkids are running it. I would hope it's something that is kind of a legacy that I can leave to the family. That's how I describe it to my kids now when I'm like, hey, can you help me out with something? They're like, ah, do I have to? And I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get something going for us, you know? I hope it's something that they are still running, and I hope it's something that they have come to love and appreciate. And I hope it's something that they have grown up seeing all of the crafting and quilting and that kind of thing. And I hope that that's still their hobby.
I'm going to push this a little bit farther. How do you think your grandchildren or great grandchildren would describe you?
I would hope that they describe me honestly a lot of how I describe my mama, that I was always around and playful and crafting with them and creating with them and really encouraging their creativity. I would hope that they describe me as that. I would hope that they want to levy that into a business or our business, just because it's great to not have a 9 to 5 that you have to dedicate so much time to, and then try and find time to have crafty time or alone time or calm down time at the end of the day. But if they chose not to and they have other passions, I think that's great. But I would hope that they would describe me as a really crafty person who encouraged that for them and helps them explore their own creativity with lots of love and excitement, like my mama did.
What message would you like to leave them?
It's so hard to think that far ahead because my kids are only 18 and 21 and no thoughts of grandkids yet. But I think I would like to encourage them to follow their passions and not feel scared about following those passions. When I was in college, at first I went as an art major, and that's what all of my undergraduate work was in, was art and art history. And I really only got into psychology and became a psychology major and then went to graduate school to be a therapist because I was kind of told you can't really earn a living as an artist. And so you can do the respectable thing and go into art history and maybe run a gallery or be a professor or something like that. But there's really not much money in that studio art kind of line of work. And I started taking some extra classes and had to take a psychology class. It really focused on working with kids and art therapy with kids. And I thought that's really interesting. That's how I kind of morphed into becoming a children's therapist. And I think I did that almost out of fear that I wouldn't be able to support myself as an artist. And quilting wasn't really in my brain yet, but all sorts of other creativity was. But I think I did that almost out of fear just because there was so much messaging like, okay, that's nice for downtime, but for a living, you need to have a job. You need to go work for someone. And I remember when we were starting to talk about starting a business, I was voicing to my family and my mom about just really not happy with the work that I was doing at the time. And it was very stressful. And after 25 years in a very stressful field like that, I kind of needed a break. So she was encouraging me, well, maybe look for somewhere else. You can go work for someone else. You can go work for someone else. And I was thinking, but I don't want to work for someone else. Why can't I be the person that other people work for? So I think I would definitely encourage younger generations and even my kids. I do this with all the time to like really try and explore your passions and don't worry about having letters after your name. You don't always have to have that college degree. It's useful. And I think that that's something that was kind of pushed on me was you have to get a college degree and you have to have letters after your name. You have to do that kind of thing. And I think I'm doing the opposite with my kids where I'm like, find something you're passionate about and then do that and enjoy that and find a way to make a living out of that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you go work for someone, but you could do a lot of entrepreneurial stuff on your own and still make an amazing living and have a great time and not be so stressed and unhappy. I don't want my kids or grandkids or great grandkids or any youngins out there to think that they just have to go out and get a job strictly for paying the bills. I think that's kind of miserable to be young and think about the next 50 years of your life doing something just to pay bills.
Yeah. And living for that week vacation.
Yeah. And 1 week or even 2 weeks off a year is not enough. You need more downtime. I don't know how the economy will work with all of their dreams, but hopefully they find a way to navigate all of that.
Moving on to other crafts. Are there other crafts that you do or have done besides your quilting?
I don't know that your podcast is long enough, but yes, I do have a lot. Sewing was actually something that came later to me. In the beginning, it was a lot of drawing and sketching and painting just because I grew up with a professional painter as an aunt. Being a young adult with not a lot of money, but you want to decorate your house. And so you see things on Pinterest or online, you think, oh, I could do that. And so my husband and I constantly, we still do this, have decorated our house with things that we have been inspired by or just kind of straight up copied the look of something on Pinterest. So he would maybe build something out of wood and I would paint it, that kind of thing. We do a lot of that. When my kids were little, I got into cake decorating, which was a random thing, but it's so much fun and a great way to be creative. My kids were getting these birthday cakes from the grocery store or wherever, and they did not taste good. And I remember one year I thought, well, I spent $60 on this birthday cake so that she could have a special mermaid birthday cake. And it tastes horrible. The frosting was not any good. I bet I could do better with Duncan Hines. And so I started learning how to do a little bit myself. And then I went to Joann's and they had a cake decorating class. And so myself and a friend, and I dragged my mother in law along, and we started learning how to decorate cakes. And then I just kept going with it. And then I got into the sugar flowers and fondant and the modeling chocolate. And so I got really into that. People always told me, you need to really open a bakery. You need to open a bakery. And I thought, there's no way that I would want to do this from sunup until sundown. I enjoy it when it comes around, but I definitely would not want to do this nonstop. That was one of them that I still do for special occasions, but I don't want to do all the time. Like quilting, I want to do all the time, all day, every day. I don't want to take a break, even though my neck is hurting, my shoulders are hurting. But cake decorating is one that was really fun. I've gotten into calligraphy, I've gotten into paper quilling, all kinds of random little things, but I definitely do like to have my hands busy. I want to always be doing something with my hands. So even if I'm just sitting there watching a movie, I want to be doing something with my hands. So all different kinds of creative things.
How about other hobbies that you might have?
I wouldn't say as a hobby, but more for health. I do try and get up every morning and go for at least a 30-minute, but usually an hour-long walk. And so that's usually about 3 miles. I'm kind of on a little bit of an incline because I'm in the foothills. So it's a pretty good exercise for me. And I do take the dog, so she gets out. That's another little hobby. I would love to say that I do gardening. I've always wanted to be one of those little old ladies with a little hat with the brim and the gardening gloves. And I want to be out there growing my flowers or growing veggies in my garden. And I would love to be that. And that is not me. I have tried so many times and I try with all my heart and I kill everything I touch. I think I smother it with love or something. But I'm very careful about what I buy and I read on how to take care of it. I'm really great with succulents. We do have a bunch of succulents, and that's about all I'm able to do, sadly. But I would love to be gardener. I have tried other things like crochet and knitting. My mama taught me how to do those as well, but there was something about the timing and the counting, and you have to get their stitches just right, and it was more frustrating to me than anything, and so I kinda gave up on those. But no, I don't really have a whole lot, especially now that I'm running a business. I don't have a lot else that I do other than designing quilts and sewing the quilts. And then trying to take pictures of everything or film everything that I do, like all day, every day, my life is filmed because we make content out of it. And so that's pretty much a lot of what I do.
Yeah, there has to be seasons of life too. And you're just in that busy growing your business season.
Yeah, it's very busy, but it's awesome that I get to have something that I'm passionate about and I love because it doesn't ever feel like work. So whether I'm working on a quilt for myself or my kids or someone in the family, or I'm working on something for the business, it all feels the same to me. It's just something that I love to do.
Yeah. Even though you said you would like to be a gardener, does it show up at all in your quilting?
You know, it has only shown up maybe one time. There is a pattern that I did called fall petals. It's a close up of two flowers. And then it has like a leaf in the background and it's very pixelated. And so you have to stand back and take in the whole thing. But I think that's the only one that it's actually ever shown up in. Those gorgeous flowers I would never be able to grow myself, but they're on a quilt.
Do any of your other hobbies or crafts show up in your quilting?
I don't think so. What I like to do is beginner patterns. That's kind of my niche. I don't ever want quilting to be a dying art form. And I want to get more people involved in it because I constantly hear people on social media saying, "Oh, that's beautiful. I wish I could do that." And I want to shake them and be like, "You can, you can." We have almost all beginner patterns. So that's what I kind of like to specialize in is getting the newbie going, teaching them how to do that. We have classes on the website you can take. We have beginner patterns. We have beginner quilt kits that you could buy a kit and just get going on it. And I always tell everybody, please email me on the website if you need help. So I really just try and specialize in beginner stuff. And that ends up being a lot of easy geometric blocks that they can put together. So I haven't really leaned too much into pixel quilts or things like that, just because I'm trying to keep it really simple for beginners.
Yeah, I love those pixel quilts, but I haven't accomplished one yet. Share about who introduced you to quilting.
That would be my mama when I was younger, taught me how to do my first quilt. She said I had a lead foot, and so it went pretty quickly. And then it kind of got put away for a long time until my mom was getting ready to retire and she started taking some classes with friends after work. And so once a week after work, she would go down there and learn how to quilt. And just hearing her talk about it brought it back to me. I was like, I had a really great time doing that. That is one of my favorite childhood memories. And so I thought she was kind of crazy for working full time and trying to do all this because I was also working full time. And I was like, I don't know how I have kids and all these pets and a husband and work. And I don't know where I would fit that in. But the more I saw her talking about it and enjoying it so much, I was like, I need to do that. And so she kind of brought it back to me in adulthood. So there's two of them. I think the early introduction was really great. And the fact that it is my favorite childhood memory, and then the reintroduction of it later. So they both kind of introduced me to it at different stages of my life.
So you got thinking about it. And then did you take a class or did your mom show you?
No, what was really funny is, as a mom, everything you do is for your kids in the end, right? So my oldest had been thinking about wanting to get a sewing machine. So I signed her up for a little kids class and they made a hero cape and they made a pillowcase, some little things like that. And so I'd gotten her a little sewing machine off of Amazon or something, a little brother machine. I saw her wanting to learn to sew, and I thought, grandma is starting to get into quilting. Why don't we make a quilt also? And so we went through Pinterest. And again, I've made one quilt in my lifetime as a kid. I was probably 7, 8, 9 years old. And we saw this one that was a chevron pattern. And we thought, oh, that's really, really cute. I bet we could do that. And do you know what we did? We made about 1,000 triangles because I did not know that you're supposed to do half square triangles and that there was a much easier way to do this. But no, I made about 1,000 triangles and then we would lay them out row by row by row and kind of put them together. And we sewed all of those triangles together on the bias, stretching it all like crazy because I didn't know what I was doing. But it turned out to be a gorgeous quilt in the end. And then my mom had to come over and show us how to make a quilt sandwich and get it quilting. I didn't have a walking foot, so that was a nightmare. But in the end, it was a beautiful, beautiful quilt, and it's still one of our very favorites. It hangs on our quilt ladder in the living room, and people cuddle under it all the time, and it's still alive and kicking. I've had to do a whole lot of repairs on it. At one point, I was like, I'm just gonna zigzag every single seam on this quilt, but it's still around and kicking. So hopefully it stays around for a lot longer. But yeah, it was so crazy of me to think like, I'm just gonna find something on Pinterest, but that's what I've always done. But something like quilting, there's a definite technique to it. There's things you do and don't do. And there's always an easier way to do it. Yeah, I probably should have gotten a pattern or something like that, but I didn't. I just recreated something that's on Pinterest.
I'm curious. You haven't talked about any other sewing except for the sewing when you were real little. So you might not have even known about 5/8 inch seams. So I'm curious what kind of seams you made on that first quilt, the one you made with your daughter.
Well, now that you say that, I'm really curious too. I'm not even sure what seams I made. I'm sure whatever seams I did, they were all the same. I think I knew to do that. But yeah, I didn't do a whole lot of other sewing when I was a kid. My mom always made our clothes. And so me and my sister would match, or sometimes the three of us would match. We'd match my mom. But no, I never did. I still don't do clothes. I'm very intimidated by them. I've wanted to make a quilt coat for years, and I still am scared to do that. But somehow quilting, I can do that. I can do some straight lines, but those sleeves, they scare me. So I've never done the clothes. I'm honestly not sure. I wonder if my mom told me to do a 1/4 inch seam or did I do 3/8 or I have no idea what I did.
I was told as long as you did the same thing throughout. So that's what you did.
Yeah.
Whether it's a quilt you made or someone else made? Do you have a favorite quilt?
Hmm, that's so hard. I don't think I'm a person that has favorites. I think I have a collection of favorites, and I like each one for a specific reason. So it might be that I really love the quilting that I did on this, and so this would be my favorite quilting quilt. Or I really, really, really am obsessed with the fabric that I used on this one, and so this is my favorite one for fabrics. Or it might be the pattern of one. I don't know. I think the one that I most impress myself by is probably the fall petals one that's on our website, and only because of the quilting that I did on it. So that was a quilt that I wanted to quilt up with tiny little matchstick quilting lines going from side to side. And I had gotten a long arm and I was very excited to do this. And so I set my channel locks and I would start to go and my thread would snap. And I'd be like, oh no, what am I doing? I'm still learning. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I think it was a combination of a whole lot of things as to why that was happening. And luckily we were able to get it fixed. But that particular quilt has so many starts and stops. And I don't dare wash it or use it or anything because I'm so scared that it would start to come apart. And I'm definitely not going to sit down and pick all of those little, they're probably a quarter inch apart throughout that entire quilt from side to side. I'm definitely not going to pick that out and requilt it, but it's a beautiful display quilt. And I think that's the one that I kind of most impressed myself with because we had to have the machine worked on. So I had to take it off of the frame. I had to put it back on the frame several times. And I think just the fact that I was able to persevere through all of that, it took probably like 3 months for me to get that quilted between trying to get my machine dialed in where it needed to be and just trying to get it finished. And so when you look at it, it's gorgeous with all of that little matchstick quilting. Absolutely gorgeous. But I would never want to use it. So it just kind of stays there and I stare at it and I love it from afar, but I would not want to ever use it.
That learning curve on anything, but on a long arm, that just something to deal with, isn't it?
It's its own thing. It is really its own thing. It's completely different than a domestic machine. So someone told me that it was just like doodling on a piece of paper. And it is not. It is not by a long shot. You might doodle on a piece of paper and come up with like a quilting pattern that you want to do with it. But in the moment while you're quilting, it's not at all like doodling to me. There's a pretty steep learning curve there. It's the troubleshooting. That's what it is. It's the troubleshooting, all the little things that happen. So is it your bobbin tension, your top tension? Do you have a burr? Are you using the right kind of needle? Do you have your needle dialed in exactly the right way? There's a lot of little things that you have to learn. And thankfully, I have a really great quilting community that I can reach out to, that I can text someone and be like, what am I doing wrong? I'm going to lose my mind doing this. And I have a lot of people that have been able to help me. But yeah, it's its own thing. It's very, very different.
There's such beautiful work with them, but yeah, I don't think I'm ready to deal with all that. Every time I talk to someone about that, I'm thinking, yeah, I don't think I'll go that way.
I think definitely my goal is to get the automation for it so that things are more precise. That would be my goal one day, is to do that. It's also a good workout on your arms and shoulders. And I have had a lot of issues lately with my neck and my shoulder, just like that repetitive quilting motion and leaning over and your neck hunching over your machine a lot. And the times that I'm not sewing, I'm on my computer designing. So it's a lot of like neck and shoulder stuff that I've been dealing with. And so I can really only long arm for about like 15 or 20 minutes. And then I have to stop because otherwise it starts to hurt and I don't want to re injure myself. So I take it in little spurts, is what I do. So I'll have a long arm that stays up there for a really long time. And I just work on a little at a time versus if I was able to get automation, it could do a lot of that, and I feel like the quilting would be a little bit more precise, and I'd be a little bit more happy with it, but then also it would take a lot of the stress off of my neck and shoulders. So that's probably the next goal that we have is the automation for it.
Hard to do each step. I'm thinking of the finances of it, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely an extra cost.
All the tools that we have available to us, what is your favorite tool?
Well, thinking back to my very first quilt that I made, I think my favorite kind of like set of tools would be like a cutting mat and a rotary cutter and a ruler because I did not have that growing up. We didn't have that. We would draw things and cut them out and do your best to get them square. Yeah, just the amount of cutting with scissors was exhausting. So I think that's probably my favorite set of tools. Probably what I use a lot of is honestly my computer and a lot of the designing stuff. So I think having like a great software program, if you're going to get into designing or get into the business side, I think that is invaluable. So I know people that are just starting out and they're trying to do things on Microsoft Word or something like that. And I can't even imagine starting out like that. Or even EQ8. I think you need to maybe step up a little bit from there and get into some of the Adobe stuff. Or recently I've started using Affinity. I think that's probably like my favorite designing tool is yeah, getting into some of those really great software programs.
When you're quilting, there are so many steps. Is there a certain step that you really enjoy, or do you like each step along the way?
I think I like a little bit of each step. I think where I start to not enjoy it is when you're on your 30th block of the same thing and you're like, okay, I'm done with this. We can move on to something else. So I do like a little bit of the prep. I do like a little bit of the cutting and the piecing. I can't say I enjoy quilt sandwich that much, but having a long arm does make it a lot easier. But it's still a lot of work trying to load it and get it even and all of that. But yeah, I'd say I like a little bit of everything. If I had to choose, I'd probably say piecing the blocks would be my favorite.
As long as you don't have to do too many of them, right?
Yes, if it's repetitive, which again, I do a lot of beginner patterns, and so a lot of it is a lot of the same block that you're making over and over again. And I would say that I love to see the block come together, and then you get to get that picture for social media of your finished block, and you're like, "Oh, it turned out exactly how I had drawn it." It looks exactly how it looks in my head. That's really awesome. I do love to see the quilt top come together and you get to see the whole thing come together. The problem with that is by the time you're sewing on your last row, you're kind of frustrated. You're like, okay, I've been at this for a while now and it's bulky and you're trying to hold everything together and your pins are stabbing you as you're trying to sew that last row on. But I do love seeing it all come together in the end.
I'm curious, as you said, sewing the last row on. So do you like start at the top or bottom and do row by row? Because I tend to do two rows and the next two rows, next two, and then those two go to make four and four. And so by the end, I'm putting the top half with the bottom half.
Yeah, that's usually how I do it. Sometimes there's an odd number of rows and they end up doing like 3 of them and then 2 of another when you do your final sew of that last row. Yeah, that last little bit where it's like really heavy and bulky and you have your whole quilt that you're trying to manage. Yeah, that's a lot.
I was just curious. I thought maybe I missed something.
No, no, that's how I do it too. Yeah.
Tell about your worst quilting experience.
Well, I would say it might be that fall petals one where the thread kept snapping for months. But I'd say this may be like my worst quilting, but probably my worst experience was I was putting together a scrappy string quilt for my aunt's 70th birthday. And this was during COVID. And we couldn't all get together and see her for her birthday, which was just heartbreaking for her. the colors that she likes are light turquoise and creams and things like that. And so I was doing lots of blues and creams with some white lattice to hold it all together. And I was doing the final pressing of the quilt top, and my iron sputtered brown dirty water all over it. And I just wanted to die. I was so upset. And it wasn't so much that I couldn't go get some more scraps and do another couple blocks. I could. It was just when you're at that final, like, woohoo, I did it and it looks great. And then it's like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I have to pull these out and redo them. And I thought I was going to be done tonight. And I was trying to get it done in time for her birthday because my husband was going to drive it out to LA to give it to her. Back then, we would, put it on the porch and then go to the sidewalk and wave kind of thing. And so he was going to drive it out there for me. And I was under a time crunch. And so I was like, oh my gosh, it's so late at night. And I thought I was done. And then tomorrow I'm going to quilt it and it'll be all ready for him to take to her. No, I had to stay up another couple hours and make a few more blocks and rip those ones out. And it was a nightmare. So since then, I was so traumatized actually by that whole thing that I ended up never, ever, ever putting water in my iron ever again. And I never, ever, ever steam anything. And so I just use a mister bottle to just kind of mist it a little bit, and I just use my iron. But yeah, I was so traumatized. I will never put water in my iron again.
When people come to visit, I'm like, do not put water in that. Mm-mm.
No, no. And yeah, I don't even let the whole family use my iron. It's my iron. I will iron something for you if you need it ironed, but you're not touching my iron.
Well, that's a thought. I guess I could get a second iron.
Yeah, they're not that expensive to get a little iron for the family to use. But yeah, you're not using my $100 iron.
Why do you continue to make quilts when you could spend your time doing anything you wanted to do?
I honestly don't know. I think it's just something that I really, really love. And I'm just really passionate about it. Even to the point that I will sit here and quilt even when I am long past the time I should have stopped because my shoulders are hurting or it's way past bedtime. It's almost like you do it to your own detriment. But wow, that's a soul searching question. I honestly don't know why I do that. I think it's just something that I love. I love the beauty of it. I love taking different fabrics and cutting them all up, and you see all these tiny little pieces, and then you've put together something beautiful in the end. I love the geometry and symmetry of it all. I don't know, that's really interesting. It's just a passion. It's just something that I love. Like, why does a painter paint? I don't know. Why did Van Gogh paint all those beautiful paintings? I don't know. It's just something that he loved and he felt compelled to do. I think quilting is just another art form.
So, besides making them to sell your patterns, who do you make your quilts for?
Everybody and nobody. So sometimes I don't have anyone to give it to. It's just something that I felt called to make. The beauty of those fabrics coming together, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it after. It might sit in a storage bag or it might go on my quilt ladder. Who knows? Sometimes as I'm putting something together and I finally see it with my eyes starting to come together, it's like, oh, this would be perfect for so and so. And then I finish it up for that person. So I might find the backing that that person would love or something like that. Sometimes I'm in the store and I see a fabric that is absolutely gorgeous and it just reminds me of someone, and I end up making them a quilt. I had no plans to make them a quilt, but that fabric just spoke to me for them. One time I was at a store and I saw one with the little dachshund puppies, and I think they had doggy sweaters and doggy hats on, like it was wintertime or something like that. And I had a friend at work who had mini dachshunds, and I thought, oh, I'm going to make a quilt for her. I don't know why. I just felt like I had to make a quilt for her. And now she says she absolutely loves it and uses it all the time. This is how I have such a huge hoard of fabric now is that I'll see something, oh, my daughter would love that. And I'll get a whole bunch of stuff. And it might be 5 years before I make that quilt for her until I see a pattern that really speaks to me. But sometimes I make them for somebody. Sometimes I'm just making them because I feel like I have to make them and I'll figure out what to do with them after. That's actually a conundrum that I'm dealing with right now because I had so many test quilts. So for each pattern that I write, I test it a couple of times myself with the different sizes. All of ours have different sizes. And then my mom, we call Grandma Honey. Grandma Honey is my first tester and she'll test it. So she's got one or two of them. I end up with so many test quilts that I don't know what to do with. And so I do want them to stick around for a while because we take them to different locations and we take pictures and things like that. But eventually, I mean, I have quilts from like 2 years ago. I don't need five of those. And so what do I do with them? So we talked about donating a few, which we'll probably be doing here soon. But then also I picked out several of them and I put them up on the website. And I did a couple of social media posts like, hey, we're going to sell some of our testing quilts because we have so many. And I haven't made them for a particular reason or I haven't made them for a particular person. They're beautiful and I love them, but I can't keep them all. And so that was a new little issue that we came up with was I have no more room to store all of these and we need to kind of pass them on to new homes. So that's something that we've been working on lately.
I bet people will love to be able to get one of your patterns made by you. That would be cool. What project are you working on right now?
I always have a lot of works in progress, but for the business, we're about to launch one called Buffalo Stars, which is kind of a buffalo plaid mixed in with some star blocks. So the next project that we're working on for the website that we'll be releasing late in 2024, we're calling it the Naughty Quilt because it's kind of like a knot of interlaced fabrics coming together to form a star. So we're calling that the Naughty Quilt. And then, of course, I always have my own projects that I'm working on. So right now we're working on a project of 4 cousin quilts. So they're going to be identical quilts, a little bit different, but for the 4 different cousins. So for my 2 girls and then their 2 cousins, it is a panel quilt. It's actually an old Robert Kaufman fabric that looks like a cityscape at night. So it's like dark and moody, but it has these great splashes of color in it. So I'd gotten that from a fabric reuse store. And I showed my daughters, I'm like, I don't know what to do with this, but there's a couple yards of it. And they said, you could cut that as a panel into maybe 3 or 4 different ones. And then I'm like, yeah, you're right. I could do 3 and maybe I could teach people how to put borders on it or something. Like I'm always thinking of like different content to put out, different YouTube videos and things. And my youngest daughter said, no, you should cut it up and make it look like a window. And so we decided to cut it up and put it together with some black sashing because it looks like a cityscape at night almost. So that way it'll look like the cousins are all kind of looking out of a window, but they get to see the same view because they're on opposite sides of the coast. So my girls are West Coast and they're in New York, they're East Coast. And that way they can all kind of see the same view and think of each other. And the surrounding area is going to be different. So my youngest daughter wants black borders and my other daughter wants navy blue. And the other cousins are going to be kind of like a teal and then like a green. So they're all going to have the different outside, but the inside panel will kind of all be the same, like a little cityscape. So that was just like a cute little thing that came together that I was not planning to make at all. Definitely was not planning on making 4 of them, but they come out every summer to visit us. And so now I'm under the gun. I have to get it done really quickly. So we've put pause on everything else and we're just like really pushing to get that one done. So it'll be really cute when we get all put together.
Have you done one of those window quilts before?
We actually have one up on the website called Stained Glass that's kind of like that, where you put it together with the sashing. Yeah.
It's on my list of things I want to do.
The great thing is they're not difficult at all. It's one of our beginner patterns. It's a quick little thing. I think I put one together in a few hours. I did all the cutting all at once. You work assembly line. So I sat down and chain stitched everything. So luckily it comes together pretty quickly and it's very beginner friendly.
That's good to know. Please share a quilting tip.
Well, I think aside from the proverbial measure twice and cut once that we all need to observe, including myself, I think people have found the most value in the tips that I give along self care and being gracious to yourself and don't be so hard on yourself. And I think when I share those on social media, I get so much response to that because it is a hobby, but we want it to be beautiful. And we want to have this gorgeous thing that we're able to show off. And it's just absolute perfection. But we're humans and we make mistakes. And I think reminding people that it is an art form and art is not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be an expression of who you are and your creativity. And so trying to extend yourself a little bit of grace that it's okay that that point didn't come out exactly perfect. It's okay that your seams aren't all exactly 1/4 inch and you had to flub a little bit here or there. I've been teaching my beginner classes that they're so hard on themselves. And I have to remind them, this is the first time that you've done this. I think it's gorgeous, but just be gentle with yourself. You might do something many, many times before you get it. You didn't ride your bike the very first time that you hopped on it. Try and be gentle with yourself. So we always say, it's all going to come out in the wash. Take 3 steps back. You're not going to see it. And no one is the harshest critic of you than yourself. And so you just have to remember that everyone's going to look at that and be amazed that you made that. So I think when I've taught beginner classes and they do that first disappearing 9 patch and they're like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, okay, now picture a whole quilt like that. And you're showing your family and they're all going to be dumbfounded that you were able to create that. So it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. Just be gentle with yourself. And I think that's my biggest tip for people is just be gentle with yourself and remind yourself that it's about the journey of it. It's about the enjoyment of it. And it's meant to be an expression of your creativity. And it's not meant to be 100% perfect. It's an art form. It's meant to be a little messy. It's meant to be unique. It's meant to be yours. I also love to introduce people to the Quilters of G's Bend because none of their stuff is perfect. It doesn't have perfect points. It's not a perfect 90-degree angle. It's nothing like that. And yet, these are quilts that are hung in museums. And there are books about them. And there are coffee table books and puzzles and all kinds of things about this group of quilters. And it's a beautiful expression of their creativity. It's an art form. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You're not a computer. You're a human. So just be gentle with yourself. I think that's what I like to really drive home when I'm teaching classes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Describe how you went from having quilting just as your hobby and you decided it would be a business for you.
Well, I honestly had no idea that I would be launching a business or be a business owner or entrepreneur. None of that was in the cards for me. I thought I was going to be a therapist and a teacher for forever. I thought that that's how I would retire. But I think the more time that I spent quilting, obviously, like the more you just fall in love with it. I was never a quilter that would buy patterns to make. I would just kind of see something in my head and I would make it up as I went along. Like I didn't even really sketch it out to begin with. It was just in my head. And then I thought, let me try and actually make a pattern. Around that same sort of time, I started talking to my husband about what if we started working with fabric companies and we can sell fabric and notions and I can start writing the patterns. And I started practicing writing patterns and I don't know. I just kind of stumbled into it, which is really weird. And we've never taken a business loan. We've never done anything like that. It was just spare cash that we had or we saved up, and we've just done a little at a time and just added to it and added to it, added to it. So now we have tons of fabric, notions. We've gotten into kits, we've gotten into patterns. I honestly can't say that I set out with like a business plan. It just kind of felt like it was what I needed to do, and it was the right exit strategy from the work that I was doing, that I could slowly start writing patterns at night and weekends and putting together some test quilts. I just leaned into what I loved and had a good social media following already, mostly on TikTok, and started branching over to Instagram and YouTube. And it just culminated together. Like, I feel like this is what I was meant to be doing. It allowed me to be home with the kids and to meet their needs and take care of all the household stuff that I needed to take care of. And it just came about at the right time in my life. I honestly don't know. It just kind of came about and it just became this thing. And now I'm like full into it after a few years, like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing now. And we're just going to keep doing it. I don't have any plans for a brick and mortar. I do like working from home. We do have a dedicated space that is for fabric and quilting and all of that. And it's nice to just have that be that space. And then the family space is the family space. At some point, we will be moving to a bigger place because this is a great size house, but to have a great size house and to have a business in one space, it's a little too much. But hubby retires in a couple of years. And so we'll be heading up, I think, to the Pacific Northwest is where we've always talked about going, and looking for a space that maybe has like an outlier building and it's not in its own area of the house. It'll be like its own building kind of thing. So when we move up to the Pacific Northwest, we've talked about having that outlier building be a place where we could also hold classes or even do retreats. If we were able to get enough land that we could build some tiny homes on it or something, we could host quilting retreats and do classes, things like that. That would be something that I would love to do. But at this time, I really don't have any plans for brick and mortar. I really do just love being at home and being able to do e-commerce that way.
I was going to ask you if you had a place for all of your fabric and notions that you sell, but you answered that. Share the name of your business and tell us how you came up with the name.
Our business name is Mojave Farms Quilting Company. I kind of shorten it on social media and we just call it Mojave Farms Quilt Co. We came up with that name a few different ways. So we're in Southern California and we're a little outside of the Mojave Desert. So it's kind of a nod to that and to our roots and like where we're from. My husband's also from this same area. The other way that we got farms and got Mojave was this current house that we're in right now. This was the name of the model, was Mojave. And because we've always had so many pets, we've always done foster, and we've, of course, had foster fails and we keep them. But we joked when we bought this house and we were moving in that we should get a sign that said Mojave Farms, just because there was dogs and cats. And we've always said that we would move to a place that had some land. And my husband wants goats for some reason. He wants goats and I want little chickens and eggs and things like that. So we've said that we would call it Mojave Farms. Even if we moved elsewhere, we would still call it Mojave Farms. It's kind of like a nod to where we came from. And also where we started the business was in the Mojave model. That was the name of our plan.
How fun. So you got to pick the model home that you wanted.
Yes. I swear, there's so many things in my life that I'm like, I had no plans to do that. I try and teach my kids this, that I have just always been one that is just very open to whatever is meant to come my way. And sometimes you just say yes to things and you end up in a place that's way better than you could ever have imagined for yourself. So, yeah, we lived not too far from here and we had taken the kids. I think they were like 8 and 11, like they were little, and we took them up the street from here and to go hiking. And we were coming back down the mountain and these model homes were opening that day. We were sweaty. We were sunburned. We had no plans to go look at model homes that day. And one of my hobbies, by the way, I didn't include this earlier, is I love to look up model homes, mainly just because you get great decor ideas. He's like, "Oh, I love how they rearranged that room. I love the colors that they picked out. I love that statement wall that they did. I love to do that." The family hates that, but that is something that I love. So we were coming home down the mountain and kind of at the bottom of the pass, which is where we live, the bottom of this little mountain pass. I saw, "Oh, they're open today. They're finally open. Let's go look." And the family's, "Oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I'm hot. I'm tired." I'm like, "Come on, come on, come on. Just real quick. I'll be real quick." So we walked in, and thankfully, I don't know if they felt pity on us, but they gave us all bottled water. It was nice and cold. And I'm like, see, bottled water. It worked out, right? The universe is taking care of us. So we walked around and we, just walked through a few. I'm like, "Oh, that's nice. Oh, I like they did this. Oh, I really like this tile. We could do some tile like this in our house." And then we walked into this model and we just kind of were like, "Wow, I really like this one. This really just kind of feels like home." And we got upstairs. And I remember we were walking into the master bathroom and my husband and I just looked at each other and we were like, "This is it. Like, this is our house. This is exactly our house." And it was weird because we had no plans to move. We had just bought this house about 5 years earlier and we had gutted it down to the studs and had fixed it all up. We weren't planning on moving or selling or anything. We loved our house. We had spent 5 years fixing it up. But we went down and we talked to the realtor guy that was there selling the house, and my husband was asking some questions, and he's like, "Yeah, but it's a great house and we would love to have it, but we don't have a realtor to sell our house." And he goes, "Oh, we help with that." "Okay." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, I got this guy, Derek. Yeah, he'll totally list your house and he'll do the listing on your house and the purchase of this house and it'll be all done in one swoop." And we're like, "Dude, you're making it too easy on us. What are you doing?" We had no extra cash in our bank account. And somehow we were just able to sell that and we had enough equity that we were able to use it to put down on this house. And somehow the numbers all worked out right, but we were able to pick the exact house and it ended up being perfect. It has this nice big loft where I have my long arm and I have a big cutting table. And so it just worked out perfect. And I don't know how any of that happened, but I try and remind the kids, like, "Hey, remember, like, you just kind of walk into something, you just say yes, you're just open to whatever the universe is trying to bring you, and you just see what happens." I always joke that we have just Forrest Gumped our way into this life, and I had no plans to do any of it, but this is just where we ended up, and it's always been awesome.
That's so cool. So did your husband say, "Okay, no more hikes"?
No, but they did all say, "No, no more model homes. You're going to make us move. No more." But we are out kind of in the middle of nowhere, which is fine with me, but they are building up some more housing tracts around us. So whenever they open one and I'm like, "Oh, let's go look at it." The family's like, "No, no, you're gonna make us move." And I'm like, "No, I just want to look. Like, we've only been in our house for, I mean, now it's been 10 years, but at the time I'd be like, we've only been in our house for 2 years. I'm not gonna make us move." They're like, "We don't trust you. You're not gonna go. We're not gonna go look at it." I'm like, "Come on, it's be cute. We get some decor ideas." They're like, "Nope, nope, nope." And so I still have never seen any of the houses that come up all around us because they won't ever let me go.
Just too funny. I wanted to hear about your Quilting for Beginners online course. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that became a passion project of mine because I was doing a lot of tutorials online on social media, on TikTok or Instagram. We're just now getting going on YouTube, but it was doing a lot on TikTok and it was like multiple parts because TikToks were only a minute long. And so it'd be like a 30-part series, which is annoying to have to try and track down. Okay, where's part two? Where's part three? Kind of thing. So I decided, you know what we need to do? We need to just put together a quilting for beginners class. And that way people can just go and they'll see all of the basics that they need to know. So, why do I choose that kind of fabric? What's the difference in thread weight? Why do quilters use certain kinds of thread weights? How do I hold my ruler? How do I use a rotary cutter without it slipping and that kind of stuff? So we wanted to put together a course that would literally cover everything you need to know so that you could start making your own quilts. And so a lot of it is the whys and the hows. And then it takes you through 12 different blocks, the basic blocks. It's not that those are the only 12 blocks you'll ever learn in quilting, but those are the blocks that will teach you the skills that you need to have to do any kind of other block. So, for instance, like half square triangles, doing a basic star block. How do you blend fabrics together to have a beautiful quilt composition? We talk a lot about like the values of your fabric so that if you're doing a log cabin, you don't want all medium values because you're not going to be able to see that. You might want some light, some dark, some medium. So it all mixes together well. And so it goes into a lot of that, as well as the basics of this is how you do a quilt block. This is how you do a quilt sandwich. This is how you make binding and sew on your binding. And so it takes them from very beginning to very end. It's all self-paced. So I was teaching them online on Zoom, but it was very difficult with the time. So I'm West Coast. Some people would be East Coast. I was trying to time them so it would be on the weekends, but then, kids have soccer games or people have work or things like that. So we said, you know what, we're going to move it all online and just have it just be self-paced. So that way people can sign in when they have free time. They can go through it in a month. They can go through it in a year. It's whatever they have time to do. And in the end, you end up with a 12 block sampler quilt. But some of those blocks you do twice. Half square triangles, you're going to cut them in half and you end up with two of them. So you'll have a total of 17 blocks and you'll use 16 of them to put together a child size sampler quilt. Some of the students have wanted to be more adventurous and they want to do a queen size or king size for their bed. And I try to discourage them from that on their first go round. But some of them will do a little bit bigger, maybe like a throw size. And so they'll make multiples of those blocks. They get to practice more and they can put together whatever size they like if they want to try something a little bit bigger. We even have class kits. So if they want to get the kits to try that, they can do that. We're trying to make it just as simple as possible so that they can just learn from the beginning and not feel pressure to keep up with anybody or compare. Like some of the classes together, you feel a little bit of comparison and then they feel bad that theirs isn't as good as someone else. So they can do it in the privacy of their home. There's no stress, no pressure, and they can just start to learn how to enjoy their hobby.
Is there any part of that where your students come together and meet each other, or is it all self?
Yeah, it's all self-paced, and so they can just do it themselves. The way that we ran it when we were running it live was that they would have group time every week at the meeting time. And so we would watch a pre-recorded video of me making the block. That way we didn't have to spend 3 hours on Zoom together. So it'd be like a 20-minute video that I had edited down. And then we would talk about it. We would talk about troubleshooting. We would answer any kind of questions. And then as the weeks went on, we would have show and tell. So they would get to show their blocks from last week and how they did. We'd troubleshoot any trouble that they had. And then once a week, they would schedule one-on-one kind of coaching with me. So during the week, they would put their blocks together and that was their homework. And then if they had any trouble, we would hop on Zoom and we would work out tension and we would kind of work out other things. It was great fun to do that. But again, I think attendance was really difficult for people. So some people didn't get to come every week and then they were playing catch up, or we didn't have always great attendance in general. We might only have 3 or 4 people in a class. I remember one of the sessions, we just had one person. That was actually a lot of fun because it was me and her just having a lot of fun together. She is a weaver and she weaves these gorgeous, gorgeous patterns. So I had as many questions for her about that as she had with me for quilting. But that was fun. But again, not great attendance wise because of just the time difference and when people are available. And so we wanted to make it more available for the masses. If you've ever wanted to learn how to quilt, you could just take your time and do it whenever. You can do it when the kids go to bed, or you can include your kids on a Saturday morning. you can kind of work it around whatever schedule you have.
That's great. And it's all in one place. So people aren't searching out there and getting a class here from this person and a next step from another person and
Yeah.
missing blocks of it.
Yeah. There are YouTube videos for almost everything, but having to hunt for one that has everything that you need in it, we kind of really wanted it to be where you can just log into your account and everything is there. And you can just work your way down and do all of the videos. You can try your own block multiple times if you need to get better at it. You can go back to it. You have lifetime access. When you have questions about batting or something, you can go find that video and learn about that again. We wanted to make it as accessible to everybody as possible.
Sounds like a great way to do it. Do you remember when you started your course, the first person that signed up for it and how exciting that was?
I don't remember the first person. I do remember the first class. I think there was like 6 of them. I do remember when my phone dinged with the first order of it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, a student, we got a student." It was so exciting. The whole family is celebrating because 'cause they're definitely my support and they help me out with everything. And so, yeah, it was definitely exciting to tell my husband every day, "We got 2 more people and it's gonna be a great class." And then, of course, they all have to be quiet. They have to go somewhere else when I was live. And then once I was recording everything to make it be self-paced, I was like, "You go somewhere, take the dog somewhere, go somewhere, be away." And so it's definitely a family effort. It's a family business. It's something that we all have to work on and help out with. But that was really exciting. And I think more just because I love to teach, that's probably my passion. And that's probably why I like to stick with beginners is I love to teach. I love to see the light bulbs go off over someone's head when they finally get something and they're excited and then I'm excited because they're excited. And so it's really fun to teach. So I think I was really excited about that to be able to teach again.
And then you've been making patterns. Which pattern was the first one you designed?
The first pattern was one called pomegranate. It probably wasn't the best pattern for me to start off with at first because it's on point. I remember finishing up with it and then I thought, oh, I'm going to have beginners doing triangles. And maybe that wouldn't be the best thing. But I remembered I had a pattern from Stephanie at Quilt Addicts Anonymous. And in that pattern, she had just had them sew rows and then you just cut it off at the bottom. You just cut it off and you do have a little bit of wastage, but it would save them from having to do triangles. And so that's how I ended up doing that. I have thought about reworking it from time to time. I'm like, should I rework that and have it just be triangles? And no, 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 no. Cause I don't know. As a beginner, I was definitely scared of triangles and they're so stretchy sometimes. And so I've just left it that way that you just sew the rows together and then you end up just trimming it off. You just trim off those triangles, but that way it's still friendly for beginners.
And what was it like starting to sell that?
Well, when we launched the website, I wanted to have about 10 or so patterns, maybe 8 to 10 is what I was kind of shooting for. I think by the time we actually launched it on my birthday. I think we had only had enough time to test 6. It takes a long time to design and then test it enough. And then I was using testers. And so I would send it to them and be like, hey, can you get it back within the month? And so it was shocking. You have that imposter syndrome. Who would buy that from me? Or why would someone want to watch my YouTube videos? Or why would someone buy that thing from me? And I think that that hits everybody in every field, no matter what you do in life. There's always that self doubt that you have. And so I think it was shocking at first. And then I was in disbelief. And then now it's just become like a standard, oh, yay, somebody bought a pattern. And that's just exciting in general. I love, 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 love. One of my favorite things I love is when people will tag me on social media with their finished quilt. And not just because it's like, oh, name recognition or more people will come buy from us, or it's more, I'm so excited to see how they envisioned it because it looks so different than how I pictured it. And that to me is my favorite thing is just see how people's minds work. Maybe that's why I got into psychology and therapy and social work is I'm just kind of a nosy person and I want to know what you would do with it or I want to see how you envision it. And it's never what I expect it to be. It's always something totally different. We'll do quilt alongs with almost all of our patterns. When we launch them, we do a quilt along. So probably 3, 4 times a year, we'll do a quilt along. And I absolutely love to see people and their process and the colorways that they choose, and then to see the final one. It's so exciting. It's one of my favorite things.
I didn't realize that about the quilt-alongs. That would be exciting to do that. Do you ever do a quilt-along on a pattern that you aren't launching, but you've had around for a while?
Yes. Last summer we did stained glass and fall petals, I believe. And both of those we had already launched in like our first year. Stained glass, we did it because my daughter wanted a stained glass one. And she wanted it in Alice in Wonderland fabric from Down the Rabbit Hole collection by Riley Blake. So I thought, oh, I'm going to do one for you. Let's just do a quilt along with it. But yeah, quilt alongs are one of my favorite things to do. And I usually do them along with everybody else. I always have one the beginning of the year. I always have one that we launch New Year's Day. Our biggest one and most attended one, I would say, we did one called Confetti, which is jelly roll friendly. And so you cut it up into little pieces, and that becomes the confetti of the quilt. And then there's like a neutral background. But I've done it reverse value where I've used all the scraps in my collection as the neutral background, but it ended up being bright and bold. And I ended up doing it like a rainbow for Pride Month. And so all the different colors ended up looking like a rainbow. And then the little confetti pieces were just white that were kind of thrown in there. So it ended up looking like a big rainbow. That's probably the biggest one that we had. We had hundreds of people participating in that one. And it was so interesting to see the different ways that people envisioned it. Some of them did a rainbow ombre like I did. Some of them did one color. Sometimes they would just do all different kinds of jelly rolls. Sometimes it was a very busy looking quilt. Sometimes it was a very simple looking quilt. But it's so amazing to me to see the different ways that people will make them.
That's so much fun. I love seeing how they vary from quilt to quilt, even though it's the same pattern.
Yeah.
So, how many patterns do you have available on your website right now?
Right at this moment, we have 14 quilt patterns. And then we have 2 other patterns, like one is like freebie patterns. One is for a tote where you make cathedral window blocks, and those are the pockets of the tote. And then we have another free one that is for an advent calendar. And we are about to launch Buffalo Stars this summer. So that will be 15 as of this summer.
Wow, you've been busy.
Yes. That first year I was putting out every other month and it was nonstop. I don't know what I was thinking. And this year I've decided that's a little too much. I think I'm just going to do maybe 3 or 4.
That's still a lot. I think you already answered why you began to sell fabric and notions.
Yeah, we kind of launched into selling fabric just because it seemed natural to me that if you were going to buy a pattern, you'd want to buy the fabric to go along with it. And that's kind of also how we got into the kits. Sometimes you just want something that's pre-made and you don't want to have to match your fabrics all together. And so we usually put together maybe 5 or 6 different kits. We also, on our website, we will custom make kits for you for any of our patterns with the fabric that we have on hand at no extra charge. We just charge what the normal kit would be. So if you see a pattern that you really like, but we don't have a kit for it, or the kits that we have, you aren't a fan of the fabrics, you can message us on the website and we'll put something together with the fabric that we have so that you have the perfect one and you're excited about it and it's exactly how you envision it, like that's what we really want to do for people.
Wow, that's a great idea.
It just seemed natural to have it all be like a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
We haven't done much by way of thread, but that might be something that we could get into to have the thread also.
Yeah, especially since you said you talk about the different weights and what should go with things. So that would be neat. Is there anything else about Mojave Farm Quilt Company that you wanted to share?
I think just that we are constantly trying to grow and evolve and better ourselves and better our products and better our outreach. And so I think it's worth checking back. We constantly have new fabric coming in every month and going out. I don't like to have things lingering for a long time. So if they've been sitting there for a while, or maybe there's just 1 yard left or 2 yards left, 3 yards left, we're going to put that on sale and try and get that going. We also try to be as conscious as we can about fabric wastage. So I'm really careful in my patterns that if it says 1 yard, you should really only need 1 yard. And I don't want to be one of those designers that's like, get 1.5 yards, and then you only use 1 yard. And then you end up with all this extra fabric. That was kind of an annoyance to me in patterns. So I try and be really careful about that. And then also for the end of our bolts, we don't toss those. We save all those for mystery scrap bags. And so there's a lot of people, and I did not know this because this is not my kind of quilting, but there's a lot of people that love to get scrap bundles for their hexies or for their maybe little zippered pouches that they make for their Etsy or things like that. So we try and be conscious of fabric wastage and try and use up everything and not throw everything away. So I would say just keep checking back with us, and you never know what's going to be showing up from month to month, but there's always new stuff showing up and new stuff that's headed into our scrap bags.
And share where we can find you.
Yeah, you can find us online. All of our social media is under Mojave Farms Quilting Co. or Ellie the Quilter, if you search those two. The website is mojavefarmsquiltingco.com.
And those links, plus any others we find, will also be on your episode page on aquilterslife.com. Ellie, it was so wonderful to listen to your story and find out more about you and your company. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
You can find more stories on aquilterslife.com or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Also, I want to hear about you and your wonderful quilts. Please contact me, Paula Chamberlain, through the website to set up an interview. And as always, thanks for listening.